MusicalTalk, the UK's independent musical theatre podcast. Hello and welcome to another edition of Musical Talk. I'm Thos Ribbits. And today we're broadcasting on the day after Halloween, which means that today is All Saints' Day and tomorrow is All Souls' Day. And I know that because when I go walking round about, people stop and point and shout All Soul. At least I think that's what they're shouting. Well, if yesterday was Halloween, and the binary choice available to anyone on that day is trick or treat, I think we can absolutely guarantee that today we're offering you up a treat. Because we're going to be talking about one of the great shows that you could have seen at this year's Edinburgh Festival Fringe. In fact, in my view, in relation to musical theatre and the offerings available at the Fringe this year, this was the pick of the Fringe. The name of the show, I hear you ask with my incredibly acute hearing. Well, it was Cathy and Stella Solve a Murder by John Britton and Matthew Floyd Jones. And so in this very special treat of an episode of Musical Talk today, what you will get to hear are two songs from the score of this amazing 5-star show, and also an in-depth, lengthy and very funny, as well as very educational, conversation with the composer of the score of the show, and that's Matthew Floyd Jones, who just turns out also to be one of the nicest people in show business. This conversation was one of my favourites from the summer, and the show was equally one of my favourites. And the score, get this, was also one of my favourites. So put all those together and what you have today is a fantastic conversation with a fantastically talented man about a fantastically splendid show. I don't think I could say any more, so I'm not going to. What I'm going to do instead is let one of the songs of the score speak for itself, and then afterwards you'll hear that lovely conversation I had with the incredible Matthew Floyd Jones, and then at the end of that conversation there'll be another song. I'm absolutely certain you'll enjoy the next hour and a bit in the company of the amazing Matthew Floyd Jones.
Hello people, all you lovely listeners, thanks for joining us again. Welcome back. If you're new here, you've stumbled on our podcast, or it's been recommended by a friend, just sit back and relax. We're coming to you from my mum's garage, with crackers and cheese and a bottle of Pinot on the side. Our show has been described as the perfect marriage of boozy jokes, cheeky banter and in-depth chat about homicide. That's right, we're going to be telling you all about our favourite murders. Only not using that phrase. Oh, yeah, that's right, that's already a thing. The show's about true crime. We're obsessed with murder. If it's sick, perverse or twisted, you know that we just can't resist it. We've done the reading, all the facts and figures. We plumb the depths of Wikipedia to research every vile misdeed for you. Decapitation and sex cult, mass suicide, stabbing, shooting, hanging, drowning, poisoning with cyanide, strangulation and gouging out the eyes, psycho rapist cannibals who burn their victims alive. And yes, if you're suffering with trauma, these tales may cause distress. Turn off is not for you, but still nevertheless, consider this your trigger warning. From this point on there's no turning back, no deviations, we're staying on track. The show that you're listening to is Cathy and Stella's Murder Podcast. We've got crimes for you. Cathy and Stella's Murder Podcast, every single one is true. The Murder Podcast with Cathy and Stella. Don't turn off, we got lots to tell you. Join us now cause we're having a blast on Cathy and Stella's Murder Podcast. But if you haven't heard us before, my name's Cathy.
And I'm Stella.
I work in a library.
I'm between jobs.
We're from Beverley near Hull. You won't have heard of it.
She's my best friend.
She's mine.
We went to school together
since we were 5.
She's the person
things turn to shit. We've always been a little bit obsessed with murder, not just the famous ones that everybody's heard of. And though it's true our audience is small, so far one day we'll show the world the best true crime podcast of them all is Kathy and Stella's Murder Podcast. But hey, by now you've probably got that, so let's read out some listener emails. Listener emails, give us your feedback, we love to receive mail.
Ruthless92 says,
OMG, I love you, you are everything.
right back at you, mate.
Forensic Steve says,
Actually, I think you'll find.
yeah, blah blah blah, we made a mistake.
Disrespectra says,
You should be ashamed using people's pain for your entertainment.
We know.
and Doomscroller sent us 7 DMs saying,
Eat cock and die, you fucking lesbians. And that's it from listener emails. On Kathy and Stella's Murder Podcast, except no substitute. Kathy and Stella's Murder Podcast, the perfect length for your commute. You A to Z with Kathy and Stella, documenting every serial killer. Tales to shock and flabbergast, well researched and unbiased. Hit subscribe and do it fast to Kathy and Stella's Murder Podcast. Kathy and Stella Podcast. Kathy and Stella Podcast. Kathy and Stella. Kathy and Stella's Murder Podcast.
My name is Matthew Floyd Jones, and I am the composer, co-lyricist, and musical director, and on-stage pianist in Kathy and Stella Solve Murder by John Britton and Matthew Floyd Jones, which is playing at Hainsplough Roundabout in Summerhall in Edinburgh for the Fringe 2022.
Thank you. I think you've undersold yourself immediately because you've also missed out backing vocals.
Oh yeah, but I didn't want to do that. That's under duress because I would like more cast members. But as you've seen the show and people who would come to the show, it's a 5-person cast playing a multitude of characters in a very rollicking, play goes wrong, Fringe way. We're trying to do a huge show with a sort of a limited number of people, and so I always have to jump in on the piano to sing an extra harmony if I need it.
Well, it umps up the soundscape. But the
Yes.
soundscape is very impressive from the off. And actually, I'd like to start with that, if I may, because obviously you are the man behind the music.
That's right.
From this fantastic show, and it's a fantastic show. And you were saying about doing a big show in limited resources. Well, that's the world, isn't it? And certainly
is
the Fringe.
yeah.
But you succeed in spades. I think it's a show that I would call is bigger than the show seems. And when you take it away afterwards, it's like an inflatable life raft in the sense that it's actually it seems in my head to have been in the West End. I have this sense of having seen it in the Palladium rather than in a sizable but circular tent.
That's fantastic.
In a playground, essentially. So.
Yeah.
And it's exuberant, so there's energy and power that comes all the way out of it. I found it. It was one of those shows. The moment you step into the room, you think, "I know this is going to be good. I can tell." There's a kind of sort of a gloss of professional quality came out before any of the actors did. But I tell you, who was there before the actors? That's you, Matthew. So
that was just me then. I gave a professional sheen, did I?
You
Just
did.
sitting there.
you are a gloss.
Sure.
But actually, let's not undersell you, because what you were doing when we all came in, as we trooped in, because there was an enormous queue, there was a lot of people to seat, and they were doing that kind of, can everyone budge up so we can get everybody in,
Yeah.
proper sellout, was the fact that you were sitting at your, I'm going to call it piano, but I know it's a keyboard, and you were, it looked like you were extemporising music. You were obviously playing the hits from the show in a strange
Just
way.
playing a sort of a jammed overture, yeah.
And that's a great title. And it went on, of course, because obviously it took a while, because the shows in Edinburgh take the time they take to fill up.
Yeah.
So it's not strictly necessarily to the minute. So, I was looking at you, and there were a number of things I spotted. I first noticed that you weren't playing to music, and I thought, well, this is a man who knows the score intimately. And I thought, well, I wonder if he's written it. And of course you had.
I did, yeah.
But also you had command of the room even then, before the show started. So, I want to talk about the nuts and bolts of creating the show and how it came about. But I would like to start almost in parallel to how it was for me watching the show at the beginning with you.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're the first person in real terms before the audience comes in.
Yeah.
Do you feel any sort of weight of responsibility? How do you approach that? And is the jammed overture different every night?
Well, yeah, I think the reason it is a jammed overture as opposed to a more official, that I have a plan for it, not only, what you've just said about there isn't an absolute specific amount of time that it will take to seat everyone, so it does need to be flexible. But also, just to get this show up in the limited amount of time that we had, really. We had 4 weeks of rehearsal, which for Fringe isn't actually that difficult. That's quite luxurious for Fringe, but for a show of the scale that you've hinted at, where we're sort of trying to make a West End size show in a small tent, with the view to that it might end up somewhere.
Don't preempt my questions. No, I'm delighted. I'm genuinely delighted because it is a show that feels like it ought to go somewhere. But do carry
And
on.
certainly that is the plan. So yeah, I think we're like exactly as you've picked up on. We wanted to write bigger and just be ambitious about it. But in order to do that, in the small amount of time that we had, and because we didn't really have a huge amount of development time before we rehearsed for Fringe, we had 1 week of a workshop, and then we just decided, you know what, we think we've got something here. We could just feel it, like you said, you know, that energy and exuberance of it. We just thought, this is something, we have to do it this year. So we went straight into a rehearsal period of 4 weeks, and then straight up here. And the time it took to get the actual show, not the pre-show, not the overture, nothing else about it, just the scenes and the songs of the show into where they are. They're still, you know, we're still playing around with it. We're still every night, you know, or tomorrow we're going to restage that way, or we're going to sort of swap that line for that line. But it just meant that it got to the first preview, and we'd always said, oh, we'll probably have them walk in and I'll just sit at the piano because that's where I'll be during the show. I don't want to walk into the space in a kind of weird formal way. I'll be sat there already. So right. I don't want to bow and you know, have floppy hair. So I just thought, well, I'll sit there anyway. And then obviously everyone said, well, I mean, do you just want to play, you know, some music while they're coming in? And I thought, yeah, you know what, when it gets nearer the time, I'll figure out our overture, whatever that will be. And what has ended up happening is, obviously, rabbit in headlights, you know, it's happening now, we're about to do it. Of course I know the songs because they're mine, but I just try and get from one to the other in a sort of backing me, you know, I want it to feel not like an overture, obviously, because people are sitting and talking. It would be a very long overture, and I don't want people really listening to it. I just want it to. It's a mega. That's more what it is. A kind of a bed of music.
But it is. You're right. There is that balance because there's always the excited chat, isn't there, in a room,
which
very
is
much
essential.
Yeah. It really does build up an atmosphere, which is then not punctured but built upon. I don't know how you build upon an inflatable, but you get the idea. by the show. Can I ask? You know, we've started on the overture, and I hope you won't mind, I'm going to dally there for a little bit longer. Mm-hmm. Have you discovered, from your own ad hoc jamming, which of the pieces go better together? Have you found any handbrake turns? You wish I really hadn't connected this song to that song, because that does not work.
Absolutely, yeah. I think if I had time, if I had even just a day to
might be
just
a song in this.
sit down, yeah. If I could just decide the perfect flow, because that's the great thing about a true overture, and some overtures to shows, I think in their own rights are incredible. It's not just, oh, here's a compilation of things to sort of wet your whistle as to what the score is going to be, but actually the overture itself, I'm thinking particularly of, have you ever heard of the show Crazy for You? It's a Gershwin show.
It's a jukebox musical, yes.
Right.
I believe it's coming back, isn't it?
I think it is, yes, I think
It's been on at
Chichester? It was in, I think, yes, I think it is at Chichester now, and there was a production recently in London. I loved it. We did Crazy for You at school. It was a school musical, you know, a leading role I had at school. And I remember Crazy for You, for me, that overture is, because it's Gershwin and because it's all those, the way that flows, it's its own, it's almost like an orchestral piece of music. I mean, it could be. You could play that in a prom, and I think it would completely sit alongside.
Well, Gershwin lends itself to that.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes,
yeah. And I sort of feel like that to me, you know, and I love the Mac and Mabel overture, which is Jerry Herman, and I
like you a lot.
Well, I mean, there are shades of Jerry Herman in Kathy and Stella, I would say, because I love. I'm not sure if I'd say he's my favourite. He's up there. He's top 3 for me.
Well, your taste is also impeccable.
Sure.
In a terrible name drop, and here it comes. I've interviewed him when obviously before. Yeah.
Did you?
About 2007 and 8.
Is he still alive?
No, passed away a few years ago. Great pity. But I tell you what, he was a very enthusiastic man, even at his venerable age when I interviewed him.
I love that.
No staircase, I noticed, however, because there can't be in the tent. If you really want those Jerry Herman, you know, the feelings.
Felicia Taylor walking down the staircase in a big dress.
It would work.
Yeah, we've got about 5 steps either side, so it's not quite as impressive as Carol Channing.
And if she sort of wobbles down a stepladder, it just doesn't have the same effect.
It would be funny. It'd be very Fringe dolly. Yeah.
Oh no, God, yeah, now you're giving me ideas.
Yeah.
But you found some bits and pieces which do flow. So yeah, I mean, you're right. The art of creating a good overture is overlooked, because when it works, it really hits the spot. And as you say, it has the power to build a sense of tension. It does more than just give you a sense of what the highlights and the melodies are going to be. When done well, exactly right. And you do, you know, people do rewrite overtures as well. I mean, I'm going back further to Gilbert and Sullivan, but my favourite, Rudigor, has the original overture, and then it has the rewrite. Because it's one of the shows that's always developed over the years. Well after Gilbert and Sullivan were dead, they've still continued to tweak it in the 20s. Yeah. Brand new overture, and then you suddenly realise the earlier one is probably rather better,
Right.
in my opinion. But,
Yeah, exactly.
But actually, it's so interesting to have 2 overtures of the same piece to allow you to do that compare and contrast, which you don't often get.
Yeah.
But once again, I think you're underselling yourself, if you don't mind me saying, Matthew, because you've made it sound as though you're playing a kind of, I think you used the word bed, a kind of bed almost for conversation and sort of to let it filter into the noggin.
Yeah.
But I think you're doing much more than that, or certainly, to me, you were playing with passion. No, I wouldn't expect you not to, but I've been to shows, and I'm sure you've been to shows where, certainly smaller shows, fringe shows, where someone will come along and play the overture or the entr'acte or whatever it's going to be, and it's a little bit plinky plonky.
Yes.
And you're not plinky. You are not plinky plonky.
I don't like to plink or plonk. I like to play.
I'm going to write that down.
I never plink or plonk knowingly. Yes. Well, that's great. I mean, I guess maybe that is because I feel like I never sit at the piano and the performance is happening somewhere else, because my experience of everything I've done really is usually that I am a visible and active piano player in the space, as opposed to someone you shouldn't be looking at. I mean, this is the first time really that I'm sort of, I'm not really a character in something. Usually I would actually be involved. Although I know there is one moment in Kathy and Stella where it seems I might become involved, but it's just a trick.
A beautiful moment, though. And also, that's very much, it's riding, it rides the surf of possibilities in the slightly absurdist piece.
It's very silly, and it was John's idea because I was a bit resistant to it. Basically, there's one point at which everyone's being suspected of who might be the murderer, and that, it's not me. I know everyone knows it's not me, but because I'm there and I haven't done anything yet, and it seems like we've ruled everyone out, there's just a point at which he really wanted to suggest the possibility that what if it was the piano player, to immediately then be dismissed. But it is, I took a bit of persuading, because actually what I've loved about this project, based on, where it is, based on how many fringes I've done, how many different projects I've brought up here, I really was so excited about coming with something like, just as a writer, just as creative team, and even being in the show is a bit like, I'll do it because of course I love my show. Yeah. But I'm loving how, I guess what you've just alluded to is that for me the performance is in the music. It's not, I'm not delivering anything character. I just put everything that's my own character into the playing, and that's really how I love it. So
I was going to say you have magic fingers, but you do have presence, and I spotted that immediately. And I hope you won't mind me saying, and this sounds terribly stalky and creepy when I say it back to anyone, and particularly to you, because you're the person. I found myself looking at you throughout the performance as well as the performance. So you weren't a participant in the acting sense,
no.
I accept. But actually, I found that because obviously you're sitting on the bottom step.
That's
of
it.
the audience area. So
I'm in the space.
You're in the round,
yeah.
And so actually, you are there. You're very noticeably there. You are playing a very obvious role, and there's a lot of music.
It's
this.
Almost fully musical. Yeah.
Well, I want to talk about being sung through in just a shake, if that's okay, because it's quite a decision, and also brings other questions out of it, I think. But I wasn't just concentrating on the actors, or rather the characters. I found myself watching everybody, and I found you as appealing to watch as the actors, and as much part of the enjoyment for me of the piece.
Right.
And actually, that's not detrimental to the piece. It wasn't you weren't drawing focus.
No.
I want to make that plain. It was in the round.
Yes.
And actually, what that said was collaborative. It's one of the great joys, isn't it? It's brilliant collaboration.
Yeah. It was almost that the space allows for you to consider more than just what is being lit, but also because you can immediately see the entire other bank of audience members as well. I find myself watching audience members, even whether I'm in the show. Obviously in this show I'm always watching the audience members because I love watching them laugh or gasp or whatever, but I also, when I'm in an audience of another person's show, I love to watch other audience members, and I think that's something really cool about Roundabout. It just is such a collective experience thing. You're not just in a bank where you're facing all one way and the people next to you or in front of you can't really see their expressions. You can absolutely see their expressions, which was funny the other day when Phoebe Waller-Bridge was in the audience. So of course I think more people were watching her than they were watching me at that point. I don't think you'd have thought I had presence that day. Well, when Fleabag was there.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I suppose anyone sort of with celebrity is going to draw, but it also proves the point you're making. Actually, that in the round, that the audience are so much more part of the piece as well. I mean, they're always part of the piece, and I think it's always interesting. And I may yet ask this question, but what does the audience teach the creatives about the show that the creatives have written? Because they do
a lot,
even though every night an audience will do different things.
Absolutely,
and sometimes
learning, constant
intolerable.
learning.
Yes. But I did like that. But you've mentioned it, so if you don't mind, I'm going to carry on pulling on this thread. It's not quite sung through, but there's, it's about 90% music and 10% just words. Listen to that.
Boring old words.
Yeah, boring old words. And it only took me what I'm going to call a couple of songs, but obviously it's one song followed by other, so it's actually essentially a suite of music.
Yeah.
Particularly at the beginning, I was thinking, is this going to be sung through? That's a very, I'm going to say, brave decision, because it can be done. Of course it can be done, and it has been done, and you were doing it very well. But actually you also think, there are complexities in what I assumed was going to be, and was, a murder mystery.
Yes.
The whodunit is a very particular, I know this takes the whodunit in a different direction in some
does, yeah.
senses, and there's an overlay. But actually, it doesn't matter. The profile of a whodunit is very particular and very specific, and doesn't necessarily give you freedom to do things.
True.
And then to have a sung through, for the most part, score. Did you know that's what you wanted to do? I mean, how did that come about? Let's leave that more open.
It was not a pre-decided thing. John and I have only written one show before this. I say only. That sounds... it was a great experience, and we had a wonderful time with that show, and that's why we're doing a second show together.
And
but
it
was called A Super Happy Story About Feeling Super Sad. But I would say it was a play with 6 songs in it. Which it was. I mean, that was more like 90% words and 10% exciting music.
Which bit were you responsible for, Matthew?
Well, I think it's but no, it was called a musical, and it was billed as a musical, and I felt like that's a bit of a stretch, because for me, because the songs didn't further the action didn't really happen through them. It was just they punctuated bits, and because the whole play was presented as this sort of the main character, she was called Sally, and it was presented as Sally's show that she's put on to deal with her depression, or to kind of work her way through it. And so the songs were supposed to have been written by this character in the world of the play. They were supposed to be her songs. So the whole thing just felt more like, oh no, this is a sort of a one-woman monologue with little songs that she's doing just to kind of punctuate the action.
Musical interludes, almost.
Yeah, exactly, interludes, there we are. Then when we came to work on Kathy and Stella when it first started, I think the only thing I remember feeling very firm on was that I really wanted it to feel like the music was integrated, and that action happened through the songs. And I think really I can only think of one... No, I can't even think of one song in our show where there isn't actually plot happening.
Yeah.
As well, there isn't really a moment where someone just sits back and goes, based on what's happened, and just sings, "I feel happy,"
yes.
And just kind of, muses on that. It's always, even in a song where someone gets very intoxicated by what's happening to her on the internet, people sort of praising her for her investigative skills. There's a bit of a sort of aria for her, but it immediately goes into, the music flows into a scene where suddenly someone's given a clue, and someone else comes on and says, well, actually, I don't know if you know this. And so I just feel like even, it's just moments of reflection and character, but actually it's so plot-driven. And I think that is probably the murder mystery thing as well. Do you know what I mean? It's sort of the fact that you've said, you need to lay groundwork in a murder mystery. You need to have enough information being drip fed. You also really want it to feel fun and unpredictable. So it's just a lot of admin, and that's what John kept calling it, murder mystery admin, because we aren't murder mystery writers or even really
aficionados.
Yeah, we're certainly not aficionados. I wonder if we're even I mean, I love, like an Agatha Christie or whatever, yeah. But I've never tried to write a murder mystery, and I think of it as something too intelligent for me, in that way. I don't know, in a sort
it's
of
very
plot
particular,
way.
isn't it? Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't do plot. John does plot. I do, I like doing character, and I love doing music, of course. But when it comes to actual overarching narratives and storytelling, that's not, where I feel most comfortable. I love to experience it, but I'm not a story writer in that way. And I feel like a murder mystery, like you say, it's a very specific story that needs to be done right. And John isn't even a murder mystery fan, but he just so immersed himself. He was exactly, yeah. But he just immersed himself in, what do I need? Because obviously our show isn't at heart about the murder mystery.
No,
it's
lovely.
It's about the friends, and it's about people, and it's about what happens while the murder mystery is happening. The murder mystery is almost a sort of fun umbrella on which to hang everything. And so we just knew it doesn't have to compare to Agatha Christie. It doesn't have to be the most complicated Poirot ever. It's just got to hang together and be fun.
Now that's very interesting, and I want to roll back a little bit because it's so interesting what you said, because you've described exactly what the songs do. They do both the pushing the plot where it needs to be pushed, dropping things where it needs to be dropped, as in a clue or a bit of information, but also expands upon or illuminates the characters. I would sort of describe many of the songs as L-shaped, because that's how they sort of came across to me when I was listening to them, because they aren't traditional AABA, and who writes songs like that anymore? Although songs like that are fine, other styles are available. But I thought it was beautifully serpentine. So it appeared. It seemed each song had several things in it, which then interwove with each other, if you like. So it was, which is obviously a well-written song, and you could see the craft, although not in a painful way. It was smooth, and it was only if you thought about it you think, these smooth edges actually show craft rather than.
I know what you mean.
Yeah. So, but some of the songs were a little bit L-shaped, and I say it was really exciting when a song goes off in a different direction.
Yes. Yeah.
Is that easy to do, though? Or is it actually the material forces you into that?
I think so. I think it's actually a response to John's sort of offering, because what's great about John and what pushes me into more interesting places like that is that John is a lover of music, but a layman of music, I think he would say, and I hope I don't offend him by saying that. He's sort of, I actually trust him a lot, because when I sing something to him or play something to him as a suggestion, and he responds immediately and sings it back to me and gets it, I think, there's a catchy hit. Because if John gets it, because John isn't a trained musician, although he appreciates music and actually doesn't give himself credit for some of the stuff that he really actually does understand. He doesn't have the language for it sometimes, so he thinks he's absolutely the densest musician ever. But he's not really. But because he isn't really a sort of professionally a musician, it's so useful, because he might say, right, well, and he'll actually approach me and he'll say, it probably won't work musically, but what if the song went blah, 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 blah. And what he ends up saying, even if we don't, if it's impossible to do what he actually said, what he makes me think of is, but actually could a song do 3 of those things, and actually in this way? And it's something I wouldn't have, if I was just writing the song as music or as a song, like a pop song, or a standard, I wouldn't have been pushed to actually have to try and make those things work within it. But I think when it once the decision's been made as to what the song needs to sort of accomplish, I actually think it's very rarely, I feel, that you can't get from A to B somehow.
Of course.
I just think...
But you might go via C.
Do you know what I mean? You just have to figure out how you're going to get there, and sometimes you have to put an extra stop in. And I think... or you just go, you know what, for those two seemingly non-related things to go together in the same song, we have to find the way they meet that maybe affects both of them, And I think it's about having an instinct about what the overarching sound, not just of the song is, but the whole score. Because there are bits, and as I'm sure you noticed, there are motifs that recur, phrases, figures in the way of all the scores I love, and even sort of more modern scores that, because it's not actually that fashionable anymore, I don't think, but something like Wicked does actually have lots of motif in it, There's a
lot of hidden leitmotif. I mean, Wagner's got a lot to answer for, I
right?
think. Yeah, quite.
God, so much work.
Can I say, you said something very interesting there, I thought. You said, when you were talking about the collaboration, you said we have to find, when you were talking about the songs as well, we have to find a way. How often do you find the way, or how often do you create the way? And I know this is semantic nitpicking, but actually sometimes, the Gordian knot has to be cut, doesn't it? Sometimes to get where you need it to be. Is it always the word "find"? I find is interesting. That's a sense of discovery.
Yes.
But it also makes you not passive, but it makes you less active than the architect.
Almost like it exists and you're trying to see where it is. Yeah. It's funny because it's just that. I guess I related to that reaction you sometimes have when something is suggested and someone goes, "That's it," almost as if it was it and it was somewhere else and you caught it, even though it has just been made up, or like that. That makes me think of, who is it? Is it Bob Dylan or Jimi Hendrix or someone? There's a story about them in the back of a cab or something, and they don't have paper with them, and they suddenly go, "Get me some paper, get me some paper, get me some paper," and no one can, and then they end up saying, "No, I lost it," and it was because the song went over their head and out the cab or something,
They didn't grab it. Yeah.
The idea of dream capturing sort of things. I don't think I'm that woo-woo about it, but I think I do think that there is. It's almost that I feel like there's. You're working on instinct, really, I think, and so it does feel like you've discovered something that has been presented to you, when in fact what I think you've done is you've recognised in something the thing the thing that you love, the thing that you're looking for, the thing that you respond to. We don't always have it at the same time, and sometimes I have to convince him that something's right, and he has to convince me that something's right, and you come round to realising, oh, it couldn't be any other way. But I think it is very magical when you feel like the discovery is made, even if it isn't actually discovering something external to you.
Well, I mean, forgive me, I hope you won't mind me saying you're a very interesting person to talk to. I'm really enjoying this. And you. I can write it down if you like. I'm just wondering about the discovery thing as well, though. I wonder if it feels like discovery because there will be things that one has discarded, to discover something historically, just as a quest. If you're the Sir Richard Burton and you're looking for the Victorian one, if you're looking for something, there will be paths that you take which don't work, and actually you discard them, and then to discover, it is the Indiana Jones thing, I suppose, actually, then at the end, you're looking for the pot of gold or wherever it is, but you've taken lots of paths and there's been lots of trouble to get there.
Yes.
So it seems like a discovery. Yeah. I'm just probably talking nonsense, really. I do.
No, that sounded like exactly the third song in our show was Indiana Jones to find it, because it was very difficult to, it was, and we ended up coming back to a path we'd already been down, we just hadn't gone down far enough, Oh,
no, but gosh, that's an interesting idea as well. But actually, there's a hidden door at the end which you haven't spotted.
Or you just, you didn't know how to open it, so you kind of went. You threw away that whole route because you thought, well, because at the end of it we don't know how to get further. But actually, there was a way around it. You had to really be there for ages. And I think that's the trouble, is you don't always have time. And sometimes you have to sacrifice. You have to go, I think it is down that way, but I've only got an hour before the witch comes. I don't know, whatever it is. So it's But I also think that's another benefit to thinking about this as a longer process than that we're just coming to the Fringe, and that's the sort of end point of it. Is that, I mean, we already have a whole list of things that we're, for the 2-act version, we're changing that, we're chopping that, we're moving that, we're adding that, and it's great. And I think it's beneficial to see all things in a longer life form than just this one aim, And what you said about Ruddigore, or things that are being contributed to and added to even past the author's death.
Yes.
Don't know how I feel about that. But
Oh, you've got weeks before.
Yeah.
Well, can I ask you something else? Because there's a common question about song placement.
Yeah.
Which is usually, here's the narrative which has been worked through first, and then the author, whether they're the songwriter themselves or whether that's going to be part of the collaborative process, will think, well, that looks like a nexus point, or this feels like a nexus point, or this seems right. There's the song spotting, if you like.
Yes.
And obviously, the more sophisticated and the better the writer, it's all it's integrated as you go, but it isn't always integrated as you go. No. And sometimes someone else comes along, the producer says, I really think you're missing a trick there. So sometimes there is a kind of patch song that you have to write.
Yes.
But actually, the question is always historically, how do you spot the songs? But actually, it's a very different question for an almost sung through. In fact, it can only be asked of an almost sung through piece, which is, where do you not have the songs? Why? How did you make that decision?
I mean, I didn't make it, unfortunately. I think I would have.
How did you hear it being made?
Exactly. There was more I would maybe have, in an ideal world, like to have found in song, because I think as soon as something is what you just said earlier, because the first 3 songs essentially flow into each other with nary a gap, and even though within those songs there's dialogue within the song, we have sort of like a verse, a chorus, and then a little exchange of a joke, which just feels like the joke would be said, and it doesn't feel wrong for that to happen. Also, because I think what we're doing is we're presenting a cartoony, sort of heightened but contemporary thing set in a real place, it makes perfect sense that people would burst into song and then also talk to each other. So, and you just, I think you just feel where it's sung and where it's not. But because of that beginning sequence, that to me sets up the problem of when do you not sing and why. And the way we currently have it is that there are scenes of more emotional weight, I suppose, like, sort of a confrontation scene, a breakup scene. That further into the show is more of a scene with maybe like a musical tag, or it flows into the song that leads to. That I wonder if I would love to try the version where those scenes are also musicalized. Time constraints, and I think also the fact that we sometimes you can be very sort of, I don't know, bookish about it and think, oh, well, that's the wrong percentage of, if you look at it on the page, that can't write. But then the experience of it's about whether people are watching it and they think, why is it not sung? Then you've got a problem. But I don't know if in our current setup because the good thing, I think, was that we front-loaded our musical with sort of 4 or 5 really punchy kind of musical sequences that flow into each other, and to the point at which the first murder occurs. Spoiler alert. There is a murder.
I was going to say there's a clue in its title, I think.
Oh yeah. Okay, well there you go. That murder, the murder they're going to solve, happens, but it happens, sort of after 4 or 5 songs that have set up everything that we hope is, it's satisfying to know before they then go on their quest, and then I feel like that's when the murder mystery starts to take over, and it becomes about, well, actually we do want to know the clues and where they're going, and some of that stuff you want to hear it spoken because you really want to hear the clarity of it, and you don't also want to be sort of swept into the music. Music can sometimes emphasize something, but it can sometimes make something hard. Yeah, it can sometimes make something harder to process because you're listening to more than just words. It's a I don't know. Yeah, sometimes I feel like, oh, we actually can't sing that phrase. We have to have that said because people need to hear it like it's being told to them in an instructive way. Some of those stuff. So you just kind of like play around with it.
Do you know, that's very interesting because you've reminded me of something, forgive me for once again mentioning someone I interviewed, but I had the pleasure of interviewing Kit Hesketh-Hardy, who was doing a new English translation of Offenbach's La Belle Hélène, which he called Troy Boy. I know. Kit, what you like? Oh, I think we know what Kit's like. But he was lovely. But he made a very interesting point, which he said that you can tell a joke, or you can put a joke or a punchline in a song. And if you can make the punchline work in the song, you can amplify the punchline.
Yes.
But if you get it wrong, you lose the punchline
completely.
That's it. And I think that's really, exactly what
because you can flub a punchline in spoken word and still get half the room to laugh.
Yeah.
Even if you say it wrong, you can usually, because the delivery may sound like that was supposed to have been funny and will give them the laugh anyway. And I've seen that happen. I've done it. And I think if you flub it in the song, no one's necessarily going to laugh because we're in a song. We're not being asked to laugh necessarily. We're not. Yeah, it is. I agree with that very much.
And of course, it carries you through as well. So you don't even have the moment of, oh, what's that?
Exactly.
Because you're already on the next word or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's quite. It is an interesting observation. The payoff is amazing, but
it is.
The danger is great.
I think. Yeah, I'm trying to think. In our show, I do think actually possibly the most satisfying punchlines are musicalized, but the majority of punchlines are spoken. So it is that. It's the ones that we knew we could land in the songs are in there. The ones that maybe in 5 years' time we might go, oh, we should have that. But we've let them be spoken because the most important thing is that there are laughs everywhere. There's laughs everywhere.
Sorry, I interrupted you. Surely, as we've established, it's going to be your estate that sorts this. Sorry, it's terribly Mark R.
Yeah, right.
I didn't mean that at all. Also, terribly sorry for interrupting you.
No, God, no, please. I go off on tangents.
As do I. But I will say this, I don't think there felt like any... Although it is sung through at the beginning and then there's periods where there's non-musicalised boring old words, as we said, they're not boring in any way.
John, we love you, John.
Yeah. But I didn't, it didn't feel wrong. Actually, it took me a while to realise that, we were now in dialogue.
Well, that's good. Yes. Yeah. It just felt naturally
passed in. Exactly. It actually feels like a very natural path all the way through.
I wonder if that's also helped by the underscoring, because that's something that John and I do a lot. I don't know if you were heading there, but the first play we did, the one I referenced, Super Happy Story, even though there were 6 interlude songs, the entire thing was almost entirely underscored, apart from one scene where it was at her lowest moment and the music left. And actually, I remember people, I don't think they quite realised why that felt such a powerful scene, but it was because the music went. And so actually, the presence of music was completely intrinsic to that play, even though, like I say, it wasn't a musical strictly. And so we already have worked with underscore a lot, and John really loves... Because actually, I think that's also what gives it the heightened, slightly artificial, cartoonish feel that I think really suits his writing, is to have, words punctuated with little plinks and plonks and dums and dums. And I think especially...
I thought plinks and plonks have been ruled out.
Only when someone's being accused of murder. Then we can plink, because we can plonk under that. Because, there's a great bit, for me, in our show where towards the end, someone thinks they've solved it, and then someone else comes in and says, wrong again, and basically rounds off all the reasons why that person's wrong. And that whole speech is just complete, it's me, boom. I'm doing this, fudum, and it's just all these, I do all the bums and fudums. And it's so great because I remember the first time we did it, the speech was fantastic, the actress who delivers it is absolutely fantastic, the writing is brilliant, and then John said, can we just literally have every single word punctuated by a chord and a twiddle and a swizzle, and I did it once and everyone just went, oh well, there you go, because it really is, the noirish, cartoonishy, it just works. So I think that's maybe why also going into a scene in our show doesn't feel unnatural, because you've still got a bed, as we said.
Do it's really interesting. Again, it's really interesting. Because it is high energy, high performance, exactly as you say, and you just wouldn't stomach that in certain kinds of production. But by then you've earned it all the way to here, and it's a really powerful scene. I also like that fact that you mentioned in the previous show that you stopped playing the underscore for the dramatic moment. Let's not get too poncy, but I'm going to mention in Brecht. It does draw you out, and actually that really draws you back in again. It's an amazing thing. There's funny enough, in the very same venue, there's the Samuel Barnett play that's
Feeling afraid as if something terrible is going to happen.
I'm so glad you said that, because it is a long title and I forgot the detail.
I might have got one word wrong there, but it is
which is an amazing play,
fabulous. And
without giving anything away, he's taught, because he's a stand-up comedian in it, and he's got a microphone, and then there is a scene where the microphone is not used, and the dramatic amplification, ironically, that offers you is quite profound, I thought.
Yeah.
Got a very high strike rate, that particular venue, if I may say. It's all pretty good.
And the producer is our producer. We are both under the umbrella of Francesca Moody Productions. So I feel like her taste is impeccable, if I say so myself.
Well, as a punter, may I back that up? Because I agree. No, it's all great.
Yeah.
But it's a power to use. It's interesting. Yeah. I suppose I'm trying to get to the fact that I don't want to use a blunt word like format, but it's a terrible thing to say. But sometimes to play with the floor mat, which is a very different.
Even your mouth doesn't want you to say it.
To play with the format can actually produce dramatic results.
I think. I'm all for that. I don't think that. Thinking about how things are made, and it almost in a cynical sort of block building thing, it's not useful to write only from there, but I actually think that's sort of how I approach music, is sort of that certain musical choices will evoke certain things, and to throw it in there if we want to have people tear up or want to have people laugh, there is a slightly sort of by numbers thing you can do, and I think the thing I always try to do is to sort of blend and layer it in a way that feels non-manipulative. But I actually think I am quite manipulative, because I think I think I know if I do this now, John's going to say that's funny, and it's just because I've done funny music. I've done the things you do in music to make people go, whoo, which I think is actually quite sort of by the numbers.
Oh, now you're opening up the
right.
Are you happy to explore this?
It's a controversial point. I'm not sure I fully agree with it. I'm just saying there's something there. For me.
But I agree with you, funny enough. But I think there's a rotting wooden corpse in front. A wooden corpse. There's a rotten wood. I am terrible this morning. I haven't had enough sugar in my tea. And there's a kind of sort of rotting wooden log in front of us. And I know that if we start poking at it, lots of crawly things are going to come out. But I could ask you a question, or I will ask you a question, and then we can close it down. Yes. What you say, I think, is absolutely true. And actually, there's a balance between sincerity and manipulation, but also. There's also, if you like, sort of our own individual muscle memory of responses, is the best way of describing it. So you say, I play the funny music, and that provokes a comedy moment because it's the funny music. But if the funny music is in itself funny, it's a sincere funny moment. So actually, when is it? And also we respond to it. You're quite right. If I hear something which sounds to me, it's, this is funny, therefore I'm being encouraged
that's
to
the
find it funny.
Plonk. Yeah.
Absolutely. But if the music is also sincerely funny, and there is a good punchline, then I've reacted to that in a sincere way. It's that balance between manipulation and sincerity, and it's the old joke, isn't it? If you can fake sincerity, or
yeah, exactly, well, actually, when you're saying that, what I realized that the way I think about it is that qualities of comedy, the way you have a very campy panto style of comedy where the fact that the joke is bad is the joke, the fact that this person said it and who they are and what they've just said are completely at opposites, that's what's funny. Or on the other side of it, you think of something that's sort of, I don't know, like a modern sort of quite a dramedy, maybe something on TV where there's no laugh track, there's no sort of emphasised scoring, but actually it's the fact that they've said something completely deadpan in a very serious way, but actually something about the context of it makes it funny in a different way that's maybe a more modern style or a more kind of lo-fi style. Comedy, a joke is not just one thing. And so I think in some ways, and what I do think is great about John's writing is actually John's taste is to the big and the splashy in many ways, but also John has a real knack for a surprise left field sort of like joke that wasn't delivered like it was a joke, and it's spotting which one's a which and going, right, I'm going to emphasize that one because that one is a panto joke, but I'm going to let that one almost happen without any emphasis because I think people will laugh afterwards, and it just keeps everyone on their toes. And I think there's something about that as well.
A floating joke almost.
Yeah.
It's like a butterfly. Some people will catch it and some can't.
And I love it when I'm in an audience and I feel like that joke was for me. You didn't get that lady next to me. You didn't get it. And I think, and there is something also about satisfying the audience's own sort of skills. It's like they feel like they got it. I got it. I get you. I'm on it. And that's such a satisfying thing as an audience member. That I think.
But, now we're into audiences, but it's interesting, isn't it?
Dear.
I've
audiences, I hate them. So annoying. No.
But they come in different shape sizes and responses, and I often think that actually, funny enough, in a pantomime, as long as there's something thunderously stupid or funny or at the beginning that gives the audience license to laugh, then they know that they can. It's actually sometimes you just need to trigger an audience into something, and then when they're on that path, they're there.
Yeah,
but
as cheaply as possible.
Well, that's panto.
Exactly.
Which I adore, by the way.
Yeah,
I should say.
Absolutely.
But I also like those the floating joke or whatever one might describe it. Sometimes when it's out there and one or two people have got it.
Yeah.
And one or two people laugh, which triggers other people. It is the acknowledgement that the joke has occurred, which other people haven't got. They then rewind, realise they've got it, and then you can hear it move around the room. Yeah. Yes.
Love it. Very satisfying. Almost more satisfying than a big belly laugh.
Do you know, I think that's right. Yes, absolutely. It's because there's a sense of subtlety.
It's sophisticated. Yeah.
Oh, yes. Listen to us. But also it is the act of discovery, which we've been talking about a lot.
Yeah.
Well, I do think that we probably ought to go back and now set up the story that we've been discussing a little bit. So, this is a simple question, but actually it's worthwhile just for explaining the story. How did this piece come to be?
John and I were looking for the next project after A Super Happy Story, our first show, and we thought we thought the next stage would be to adapt something, because A Super Happy Story was an original story, but it was made on commission for the company that Silent Opera Productions from Hull, who commissioned it. They commissioned a mental health play. There were certain elements that they asked for, so John wrote it to spec. And even though it's so John, it's, we were like, well, we would love to do something completely original, but we also feel like an adaptation is maybe a safer thing to be our first project for a full musical, because we haven't yet written a full integrated musical together, so maybe we should adapt something. So we weren't sure whether we wanted to do an adaptation, feeling like that might be a safer place to start with an existing story, or do something completely original but do it in a way where we sort of designed it to be manageable. And we were just looking for the first one, can we get the rights to something that we love, or does an idea happen? Lockdown happened. And suddenly we were forced to sit there and actually have an idea session and think about it. And I can't remember where it came from, but I do remember John texted me, in quote marks, Kathy and Stella's murder podcast, ? And I didn't really know what it meant, but I just thought, that's a song. Yeah. And then I texted back a voice note that went, Kathy and Stella's murder podcast. And he went, well, there's the first song. And then we had to make up a podcast, decide who Kathy and Stella were. I think in retrospect, what we've realised is actually we've tapped into, or we've somehow been influenced by this general trend at the moment for true crime themed themes.
Yes.
Not just true crime itself, which is obviously has been booming and continuing to boom for ages, very popular kind of genre, but also properties on TV, film, stage that actually look at true crime and look at whether in a funny, light-hearted, sort of silly way for comic effect, the way we mostly do, or whether it's actually an exploration of quite the complexities of, is it all right that we have morbid fascinations with these things, and what are we doing?
That morality is mentioned in the piece, at least passingly.
It is.
And I'm really pleased it was there.
Oh, that's good, yes, because it was important to John, and me too, but I remember John being very clear on, I don't want this to feel like we're at all suggesting that their obsession with true crime is somehow like evidence of moral sort of
decrepitude.
Yeah, exactly, decrepitude. Yeah, exactly. Or on the other hand, we don't want to suggest that true crime is literally the most uninsidious, superficial, light thing ever, like being interested in the cello. So we kind of, he just felt like he didn't necessarily want to sit anywhere on either side of, any extreme.
No,
but
we're
he
not
did want to acknowledge it.
We're not given a view, but we are. But it's mentioned.
Yes.
I really like that. As I say, I thought it was a perfect balance because actually, it's occasionally. What is it? It's just a little bit of salt in the meal, isn't it?
Yeah.
All right. Yes, I'll park that for later thinking.
Exactly. And if anyone is sitting here being like, I want to enjoy this, but I feel like they haven't acknowledged, this effect on, the sort of the fact that it's very rarely victim-centered. Sometimes it feels morbidly sort of exploitative. And what about the victims' families? All these kinds of things. That is not without. So it shouldn't go unacknowleded. Yeah. Obviously, our show is a comedy, and it's not something that really goes into it.
It's not about that.
It
is about this, and it's not about that. Therefore,
Yes.
to recognise that is wise, but no further. Because
That's it. Yeah. Just touch on it, and so if anyone's thinking, I wonder how they feel about that, and that's because I feel strongly about that, you at least get that little acknowledgement of, well, we know that's a thing, and so please don't think we don't think that's a thing.
Please don't write.
Absolutely, but please don't cancel us on Twitter and bye. But we're going to carry on with our show. But yeah, so I think. So we didn't realise that we were chiming into this true crime fad necessarily. I quite like true crime myself. I'm not Kathy and Stella level, but I have listened to true crime podcasts and watched documentaries, and I think we just thought we really wanted to do something. Both of us, I think, felt that we wanted to have female characters either centrally or certainly there'd be a dominance of female representation. In fact, our show there is one male actor and 4 actors who play female parts. That also really appealed to us, this idea of, can we tell a story about female friendship? Can we have it not be romantic? There isn't really a romantic element to it.
Another beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Although I will also say that that resonates very strongly with murder mysteries, because actually most murder mysteries are the one major form of drama that doesn't revolve around romance.
I didn't even think about that. That didn't even occur to me. That I know that John, my experience of working with John on 2 different projects now, sorry, 2, but in both of those, he very strongly resisted making a plot or a subplot romantic, because he felt like, well, not everything is romance, and many experiences happen where people don't end up together, and especially in a small cast thing where you've got 3 people and 2 of them end up together, it sort of just insidiously implants in your mind that, well, if you haven't found, in your tiny circle of people, if you haven't found the right one, you're doing it wrong. I don't know. I feel like
you failed.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know why, but it just feels
life
right.
also isn't actually romantic.
No.
You go to the office, you go to the shops, you may or may not have a partner, but hey.
And there's romance with objects, with experiences, not with people, and I think the thing with Kathy and Stella is the romance of their quest, and then the romance of their joint experience, it becomes codependent. There's a whole sort of, their journey really involves them being too romantic with each other in friendship way, in a
absolutely, yes, it's the intensity of a friendship, and actually I always find that more fascinating, because friends are much more important to me than other things. Yes.
Exactly. and I think friendships, they're relationships the way
of course
marriages are, and I think and I love that it's between these 2 women, and these 2 women who seem like, well, actually, I think when you watch them, you think, I know why they're friends. But it's funny because they are a bit chalk and cheesy, in the kind of classic double act way. But they're not
called chalk and cheesy as a double act.
That was my suggestion. Yeah,
that'd be fabulous.
Yeah, but yeah. So I think, in terms of where it came from, in terms of the idea, it really was a sort of silly conversation that led to him saying that phrase, Kathy and Stella's Murder Podcast, and it just, when it's right, it's right. You just. The fact that I heard the tune, I heard a tune and I went, well, that's a good sign. Because whenever he writes something and I hear a tune in it, I think, there we go, that's it. And that's what I hook onto. And then it took us a while to sort of really commit to it, because we have other projects going on, and there was a lot going on, obviously.
Well, you, sir, if I may say, and we haven't touched on this at all, are Mr. Show Business in very, very many ways. You're pulling a face, which is...
Have been, I don't know, I'm semi-retired now. I just do the music. I don't perform anymore.
Do you not?
No, I don't. Well, I mean, this is as close as I get what you saw in behind the piano. No, I very happily sort of transitioning into a music-y role that probably I've always
sit-down creative role.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. I don't have to get makeup on. Yeah, I don't have to stand there and worry
about
what I look like. I can if I want.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I didn't know that, actually.
Yeah, well, it's only a recent thing, and to be honest, I sort of am of the opinion never say never with regard to, who knows what might come around the corner, agents and people listening.
Still very available.
yeah, playing age 29. I wish, but I don't know. So my the main sort of performing that I've been doing, in my comedy double act Frisky and Manage, which has been going since 2008, where we've taken breaks, we've taken extended breaks before, and then come back and done a new show, and it's all been sort of back there. What we're really lucky with that is that we did build up a fan base that has remained really loyal to us, and it always seems to be like, as soon as we announce something, they're there. And I just said to my partner Laura, who plays Frisky, I said to her last year, I love working with you, I love everything about what we do. Just right now, right in this minute, I don't want to get on stage and do it, but I want to do everything else. I almost said to her, can we just find someone else to be managed? Because I want you to be Frisky, and I want to be involved, I want to help write it, and I want to, sit there in the audience and just enjoy it. I just don't want to do it right now. And who knows how that might go. But it also, I think we both, we love doing other things too. Laura does all this directing, Laura stages things, Laura performs solo all the time. She's an actor, she's a writer, she's a director.
Well, you've both got many strings to your bow.
Yeah, I think so, and I think it's really lovely that what we've managed to do over the years is we've always come back to Frisky Manage, but we've also, Frisky Manage has been a launch pad for us to be able to do so many other things with other people, and then we always come back to each other and go, oh, you're so great to work with, because it actually really reminds us how special our double act is and was and will be, is that but it's so good to have other. When it was just for Skin Manage, it was tough. And then as soon as it became something that was our gold thing, and then we would go and do silvery and bronzy things around it, and it's just
it's nice to have a palette of colours as we're playing.
Exactly. Yeah. So I shouldn't do ranking of colours, should I? That was very Olympics of me. Yeah, yeah. Frisky Manage is the red in my palette, and then I'm enjoying being blue for a bit, and I think actually what's great about this is that it is that perfect spot where I do feel involved in the show, and I feel like I get my little zhuzh of because it never really goes away, that idea that people are laughing and clapping at something you did. It's just intoxicating, and anyone who says it's not is lying to themselves. There's a definite ego rub of that, but it's perfect for me right now. Yeah.
But I think, actually, ironically, what you've really described to me is a huge wealth of versatility, actually, because it is possible to move from X to Y, from Y to Z, and then back to A.
Yeah.
I ran out of letters.
You started at X. You get made it very hard for yourself.
Well, it's so underused.
Right.
There's always a parking spot.
Whoever writes X, yeah.
What you described, though, going back a little bit, is exactly as you say, the magic word. There were two different parts. There's the adaptation or doing your own. You get the resonant text.
Yeah.
You hear the lyrics, and suddenly you've taken a step. And oddly, it's just that very first step that takes you on the path, isn't it? In fact, it seems to me that all the other options really dropped away because suddenly something had cohered, I suppose, rather than coagulated.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I've seen some shows which have arisen from coagulation.
Right, yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think decisions are being made all the time, but that first decision does sort of focus you into one area, and that is when sometimes if you do realise that it's not working, so you have to scrap a whole thing, and that's hard because they call that, especially if you think there's something good in it but it hasn't come together. Killing your babies is a phrase that often gets bandied around with the writers. Where
Mark Twain, I think, isn't it?
Is it? Oh,
yes, I think so.
I thought it was just random comedians at Edinburgh. Killing your babies is, you do have to be okay with it. And we did, in Kathy and Stella, when we were writing it, we quickly became aware that it was growing into a 2-act show, and we're thrilled because actually initially we were like, can we do 60 minutes? God, we've never, this is new for us. But then when we realised, oh no, here's where the interval would go. We've got 17 characters, oh dear. And it got to the point where we did have to say, I actually think we have to lose this really fun character. There's one character who's not in it who
at the moment
we actually thought would be the star part, which is this amateur investigator who kind of becomes a rival to theirs. He was sort of based on a kind of John Grisham style, like very self-important detective, who just like turned up and said, I'm going to take it from here, girls, and be really like arrogant.
Terrible,
and terrible. And we had to lose him. He had his whole own theme song. It was sort of 5 verses long. There was just no room for it.
No.
But
he's
we
in the
loved
cupboard
it.
at the moment,
He's in the cupboard, and I think he was probably John's favourite. character at one point. He just thought, well, we can't lose Richard Barker, investigator, but we had to. But that was really something where we went totally down a path of it, got it, great, and then we looked at the whole shape, and we just knew that was something we could just easily take out without affecting anything else, because he was a show. He'd come on, stop the show, and leave.
Yeah. Which is lovely, but
you know what I mean. And we have other characters who do
ball.
that. Yeah, we've got Felicia Taylor. She always comes on, stops the show. So, yeah, I don't know. It's all. I don't know whether I think there's a hard and fast rule to some of these things, but you do look back and think of patterns, don't you? And so patterns with how I work with John is that we are very. I think we're both pretty level-headed about if something has to go, it has to go. We're not fussy. We don't often argue. We might be a little bit pushy-pulley, but even then I just feel like we're so simpatico. It's not hard.
It's a healthy push and pull.
I think so. Yeah, exactly. He'll challenge me, and I'll poke. And also we learn from each other. His scansion of lyrics, I think, because I'm very picky about that. About where the stresses are. And, there are some in this show that I haven't won the battle of, but I have to, in my head, I have to say, just in terms of explaining what I mean, in terms of where you would naturally stress the syllables of a spoken line, if the music does not stress those same syllables, it sounds clunky, it sounds odd. You sometimes can't tell why to a sort of maybe a layman ear, but you just think, oh, that line didn't sing. Whereas a really good scanner, Oscar Hammerstein, that it just scans. It's just like, it's like you're saying it, but you're saying it on the tune. And I'm so picky about that.
You've embedded the conversational intonation.
Yeah, exactly. And you could just really hear how that character would have said it. And I think John has really learned that is probably my main bugbear with the lyrics is if he presents something and he says, but it fits, it's got the same amount of syllables, and I go, say it to me now, and now sing it, and then he'll go, oh yeah. But the trouble is sometimes you don't win the battle, and he'll say, actually, I think that's a funny bad scan, and sometimes he's right, because sometimes the bad scan, there's one about Rick Astley in our show, which I really was so against, and then whenever she does it, it gets this big laugh, and I just think, okay, all right, you can be picky about something, but also know that's just you.
But also, you've also described the fact that you've pushed for Lion and you've won some of the battles, but you haven't won all the battles. No, and actually, if you had won all the battles, you may not still be in a working relationship.
That's true. You've got exactly. And there's stuff that he will have given in to me where I will say, actually, musically, that just does not work, even if he thinks it does. He totally bows to my, and I bow to him when it comes to sort of word choices, because he really, he's so deceptively clever with them. He, it seems, I think, because his style, it feels so conversational and so colloquial and so sort of
real,
authentic, normal, and a bit like, oh, I'm just listening to a conversation but actually it's so crafted, and it's actually lots of craft gone into it. Well done, John. Bravo. Never leave me.
Well, I agree with you there. Yeah, but forgive me. The interesting thing is retaining what I would call authenticity of language communication in a heightened show, because it's very easy to go off into heightened ways of speaking, and actually I think the characters you still think, oh, I could meet them in the supermarket.
That's it. That, I think, is his beautiful area that he lives in.
The supermarket.
In the heightened real supermarket. Yeah. I love it.
So I think I've got two final questions, if I may. The first is, what are you learning in Edinburgh and in performance? Because that is always an interesting question for me. And then where does it go next? You've already said where you'd like it to go next, but how?
Yes.
As far as you can tell.
Well, in terms of what we're learning from Edinburgh and the audiences, I think luckily for us, a lot of what we're learning is, we were right. This is funny. It works. And I think almost, actually, we're learning that we were more concerned about would this land than we needed to be. We had hopes. We thought, I certainly felt that I strongly suspected it would be a rollicking laugh-a-minute show. But there are laughs that we couldn't have anticipated. There are laughs when someone at one point, again, spoiler alert, I don't know, at one point someone gives a very gory item, a body part that has turned up in an investigation. Police superintendent picks it up and is telling off the person who has, concealed it from her or whatever. And then she turns to some attendant and just hands him this gory body part and says in a very, very calm way, "Thank you." And that wasn't even in the script. She just ended up, the actor started doing that. She just, she said, well, I think I would say thank you if I gave it to, if I gave a severed whatever to an underling. And it gets it gets actually one of those sophisticated ripple laughs, because someone will just laugh because it's so funny that she said thank you in such a sort of normal way about this ridiculous thing. and it's just become one of the laughs of the show. And you know, so there are ones I didn't know that are there, but by and large, I think I will say John and I are such Fringe kind of stalwarts, really. I suppose both of us together and separately have been here for the best part of 2 decades, just doing. So I feel like you always get surprised. But also, we've been surprised enough in the past Fringes to know to not be surprised. It's weird. It's just, you know, every audience is different. You know, yesterday we had an absolutely full crowd who laughed at different things and didn't laugh at certain things.
Isn't that strange?
But they laugh. At the end, they go, that was funny. So it's like, cumulatively, it's funny. And I think really what I'm interested to know, and what's the most useful thing here, what do they get afterwards? What do they remember? Do they remember who the whole decapitator was? Do they remember when this person, you know, sort of did that, why? What songs do they remember? What do they come out humming? All those types of things. What's retained? Because for us, obviously, we've lived, slept, eaten, breathed it. We feel like everything is absolutely clear and memorable. But it's incredible sometimes what someone will say, oh, when did that happen? And you realise, are we really yeah, almost, yeah, who's Stella? So we kind of have to pay attention to that and sort of think about, is it as clear as it can be? Because clarity is, certainly in a murder mystery, clarity is sort of the most important thing. So.
Well, it absolutely worked for me.
Brilliant. And I think he's worked very hard, John, and you know, with me and with our dramaturg Gillian Greer, fabulous woman, who's helped us put it together, who is a true crime super fan, so she's been invaluable. I think it is the mystery is watertight in terms of clues and the way it progresses. But trying to tell it in such a short time and in such a colourful way, you never know what might just be overridden by something.
Yeah, have you dropped a point, which is the one point that actually
they
creates
said
the
it, but
mass.
at the same time that person was throwing a ball or something, I don't know, and someone looked somewhere else,
Which is easy in the round, of course.
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
You know, theatrically, it's a great piece, it's a great venue, because you get to see it all, but
it's potentially distracting,
It is.
And then, well, in terms of where it goes next, we, as I alluded to, we've always, I mean, from the very beginning when we started writing it, we realised it was a bigger thing than what we're working towards. Fringe is absolutely for us almost like out-of-town tryout of the first version of what will hopefully become. I would love it to be a much bigger thing. I really feel like the experience, the reception we've got, not just from when we've been here and the fact that we've been selling out and we've had some great buzz and we've had some great feedback, but also before that, it was just, you know, the producer Francesca, when she first kind of came to the first sharing and when she heard the first demos, she's always just been saying, this is just fab, guys, this is just so fun, I love it. Basically she was talking to us like, I want to see this as a punter, I just want to pay to see this, so can I produce it so I can go and see it? She knows all the words. Her co-producer Harriet is basically the understudy. You know, they love it, and the whole creative team as well, as they've come on board, and these are, you know, seasoned,
they
people,
know their onions,
do you know what I mean? And they come and they'll, you know, watch the thing and they'll be like, oh yes, another workshop for something I'm working on, I better see what's happening, and then afterwards they go, God, that was fun, I feel really cool, and it just kind of, you just feel that electricity frisson of, something about this is really zesty and makes people excited to work on it or see it. And so ever since that's become clear, John and I think we're just basically going, well, when can we get it to Broadway? And how?
Let's see how the dynamic works. But I walked in and there was power in the room already.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, that's
a palpable vibe.
Yeah. I wish people could see what you did. You moved as
shoulder
well.
shimmy,
Yes. But it is, it deserves to go somewhere else because it's excellent, and you can also see the possibility of the expanded version. You can see that it brings its own power.
Yeah.
As I say, not every show has a dynamism in its own DNA, and this does, I think. So
great, yeah. I mean, oh God, that's what a great quote, pull quote. Dynamism in its DNA.
I can write that down if you want.
Yeah. I love it.
Matthew, can I just say thank you first of all for writing this show with John.
You're welcome.
Thank you for being in Edinburgh so I could see it. But most of all, thank you so much for giving me this conversation, which has been a magnificent insight into a creative mind.
Well, thank you.
You've been so interesting and so fascinating. I do hope this won't be the last time we talk on the record.
I don't think it will. Not now.
Matthew, thank you.
No, thank you.
I thought that there was no one like me till the day that I met you. I hated pretty much everyone till I found someone who hated everyone too. Other friends may share a bond,
but no one else.
no one else compares to us.
'Cause I know that not a single one of them
Has found someone who's
so the one for them.
and
And if I didn't have you, I would die. If I didn't have you, I don't know how I could even get dressed in the morning or do anything at all. No reason to try, 'cause without you I'd die.
Thanks, mate. If I didn't have you, I would also die. If I didn't have you, no other best friends need apply. You're completely irreplaceable. I'm never gonna give you up, just like Rick Astley. You mean too much to me. Who would I share my stupid thoughts with? Who would I laugh until I snort with?
We're meant to be, and that you can't deny.
We're codependent. Oh, tell me, how would I keep going? Why would my blood continue flowing
When losing you would make me want to die.
if I didn't have you? I would die.
If I didn't have you, I would actually,
Genuinely,
literally, immediately die. If I didn't have you, I'd be terrified.
if I didn't have you, I'd just run away and hide. I'd curl up in a little ball and disappear from view.
That's what I do.
I do that too. And that's why without you I would die.
And there we are, another song from that 5-star show, Kathy and Stella Solve a Murder, which, as I've said before, was Musical Talk's pick of the Fringe. And before that, of course, you heard that wonderful conversation with the equally wonderful Matthew Floyd Jones. He was one of those people with whom it was a dream to speak. And he's a man of many talents, so I do hope I'll have the opportunity to speak to him again about some of the many other things that he does with his career. But of course, writing a show isn't just a one-person job, so it is right at this stage just to give a few credits. The book and the lyrics for the show are by John Britton, and the music and lyrics are by Matthew Floyd Jones. And of course, in the 2 songs that you've heard in this episode, you heard the voices of the entire cast. That is Bronte Barbe, who played Kathy, and Rebecca Hines, who played Stella, and you also heard the voices of Jodie Jacobs, TJ Lloyd, and Imelda Warren Green. The recording, mixing and mastering of those songs is by Alvin Ryan at Juno Studios, and it was all produced by Francesca Moody Productions and Cater Gordon. And what of the future for Kathy and Stella Solve a Murder? It's one of those shows that certainly deserves a future, and I know that the people behind it are still looking to develop the show and bring it a further lease of life. So do keep your eyes out for it. And a good way of doing so is by going along to the website. The best place to find information about this show at the moment is francescamoody.com. I'll spell that FrancescaMoody.com. I shan't spell the word com, that would be patronising. But do go along to the website, it's great in its own right anyway. But I fervently hope that it will soon be giving us details of when we might be able to see this show either again or for the first time. Well, there we are. I think that brings this episode of Musical Talk, where we've discussed the pick of the Fringe for 2022, to an end. And that being the case, anything further I might say would be otiose, or probably more accurately, more otiose than usual. So, not wishing to be otiose, and that's the 3rd time I've said it, I'm not going to say it anymore, at least in this sentence, I think it's time for me to stop talking, to shut the flippity-gibbet up, and allow you to proceed with the rest of your week, until the next episode of Musical Talk, which will roll along in 7 days' time. So, time for the goodbye word, which is, and there's no surprises, goodbye. Goodbye. This episode of Musical Talk, edited and presented by Thos Ribbits. Copyright Musical Talk 2022, except for the songs where the copyright remains with the creators. And may I thank particularly Matthew Floyd Jones for allowing me to play his songs in this episode. To find out more about the world of Musical Talk and listen to past episodes, go along to our website www.musicaltalk.co.uk or subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and follow us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can at MusicalTalkThos.
I do all the bums and fadums.